We're going to read today on page 274 through 276, and then we're going to answer the questions that follow. So this story is from David and the Phoenix. This story is from the first chapter of a novel about a boy whose family moves into a new home near a mountain. In the chapter that follows, the boy goes hiking on the mountain and meets a strange bird called a phoenix, a famous creature from mythology. Throughout the novel, the boy and the phoenix share exciting adventures together. So here is the part of the chapter now. All the way there, David had saved this moment for himself, struggling not to peek until the proper time came. When the car finally stopped, the rest of them got out stiffly and went into the new house. But David walked slowly into the backyard with his eyes fixed on the ground. For a whole minute he stood there, not daring to look up. Then he took a deep breath, clenched his hands tightly, and lifted his head. There it was, as Dad had described it, but infinitely more grand. It swept upward from the valley floor, beautifully shaped and soaring, so tall that its misty blue peak could surely talk face to face with the stars. To David, who had never seen a mountain before, the sight was almost too much to bear. He felt so tight and shivery inside that he didn't know whether he wanted to laugh or cry or both. And the really wonderful thing about the mountain was the way it looked at him. He was certain that it was smiling at him, like an old friend who had been waiting for years to see him again. And when he closed his eyes, he seemed to hear a voice which whispered, "Come along, then and climb." But there was a great deal to do first. They were going to move into their new house. The moving van was standing out in front. The car must be unloaded. David would be needed to carry things. Regretfully, he waved his hand at the peak and whispered, "It shouldn't be long. I'll be back as soon as I can." Then he went around to the front door to see what could be done about speeding things up. Inside, everything was in confusion. Dad was pushing chairs and tables around in an aimless way. Mother was saying, "They'll all have to go out again. We forgot to put down the rug first." Aunt Amy was making short dashes between the kitchen and the dining room, muttering to herself, and Becky was roaring in her crib because it was time for her bottle. David asked, "Can I do anything?" hoping that the answer would be no. "Come here," Aunt Amy said, grabbing him by the arm. "Help me look for the ironing board." When the ironing board was finally located, Mother had something for him to do, and when he was finished with that, Dad called for his help. So the afternoon wore on without let-up, and also without any signs of progress in the moving. When David finally got a chance to sneak out for a breathing spell, he felt his heart sink. Somehow, in all the rush and confusion, the afternoon had disappeared. Already the evening sun was throwing shadows across the side of the mountain and touching its peak with a ruddy blaze. It was too late now. He would have to wait until morning before he could climb. As he gazed up miserably at the glowing summit, he thought he saw a tiny speck soar out from it in a brief circle. Was it a bird of some sort, or just one of those dots that swim before your eyes when you stare too long at the sky? It almost seemed like the mountain waving its hand, as if to say it was quite all right for him to wait until morning. He felt better then and returned more cheerfully to the moving. It was long after dark before the moving van drove away. Becky crooned happily over her bottle, and the rest of them gathered in the kitchen for a late supper of sandwiches and canned soup. But David could not eat until he had found the courage to ask one question. "May I climb the mountain tomorrow?" Aunt Amy muttered something about landslides, which were firmly fixed in her mind as the fate of people who climb mountains. But Dad said, "I don't see why not. Do you?" and looked to Mother for agreement. Mother said, "Well, be very careful," in a doubtful tone. And then that was that. So we're going to answer the questions on the next page. The first one has two parts. It starts with, what does David think about the mountain? It is kind, it is alive, it is haunted, or it is dangerous. So you should know that he thinks the mountain is kind because the way he looks at it and the way that he describes it. In part B, it asks us to choose an example of figurative language from the story that supports the mountain is kind. So, and the really wonderful thing about the mountain was the way it looked at him. He was certain that it was smiling at him like an old friend who had been waiting for years to see him again. And he closed his eyes. When he closed his eyes, he seemed to hear a voice which whispered, "Come along, then climb." Already this evening sun was throwing shadows across the side of the mountain and touching its peak with a ruddy blaze. So the one that supports that the mountain is kind, or that he thinks the mountain is kind, is letter B. He was certain that it was smiling at him. We know people who are kind genuinely smile at us, and that is an example of personification because the mountain cannot actually smile since the mountain is not a person. It swept upward from the valley floor, beautifully shaped and soaring, so tall that its misty blue peak could surely talk face to face with the stars. What mood is the author trying to create by using the personification talk face to face with the stars? Select 2 options. So he's saying that the mountain is so tall, it could just look right in the face of the stars and talk to it. Well, mountains nor stars could actually talk to each other because they're not actually people. But what kind of mood is the author trying to state with that personification? Awe, coldness, fear, wonder, loneliness, or suspense? So the author is trying to create a mood of awe and wonder. He is in awe of this beautiful, tall mountain that stands before him, and he's wondering what it would be like to climb it. Unfortunately, he didn't get to climb it in the part that we read today. All right, moving on to the next page. But David walked slowly into the backyard with his eyes fixed on the ground. What does the word fixed mean as it is used in that sentence? Tied, installed, repaired, or focused? His eyes were tied to the ground. His eyes were installed to the ground. His eyes were repaired to the ground. His eyes were focused on the ground. Fixed means focused. In that sentence, it means focused. Which detail from the story provides the best clue for the meaning of the word fixed? David had saved this moment for himself, not daring to look up, clenched his hands tightly, and lifted his head. So if they were fixed or focused on the ground, that means he's not daring to look up. So he's going to stay with his eyes on the ground and not look up. When David finally got a chance to sneak out for a breathing spell, he felt his heart sink. Underline the sentence in the paragraph below that best helps you understand the meaning of the phrase, sneak out for a breathing spell. David wanted to climb the mountain, but he went to help with the moving first, and he got asked to do one thing after another. And he was so tired, and he just wanted to climb the mountain. He went outside to just take a breath and take a step back for a second because he was so busy. So the sentence that you should underline in this paragraph is, so the afternoon wore on without let-up and also without any signs of progress in their moving. You are not going to do page 279. I do not want you to tear out page 279. You need to tear out page 266 through 278, which is the work that we did this week, and you will turn it in next Thursday when you come for your test day.